The crucifixion of Jesus is not a well-established historical event. Groups such as the Basilidians, who deny the crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
That sounds smart until the second you open a history book.
You say that the Gospels were authored by eyewitnesses. Do you have any evidence for that? You can't even prove that the people who you claim wrote them actually wrote them.
People you know think this way, so these are the kind of challenges we need to be ready for as Christians. In my last video, we saw a famous Muslim who tried to destroy Christianity, but we saw how the Bible and church history destroy his arguments. In this video, we're responding to Cora, who tries to shut down any reason you could have as a Christian to believe in the resurrection. I'm on a mission to find the reasons people reject Christ to give you the best biblical responses. She makes 3 claims, and we're going to break them down one by one in this video. Let's dive in.
The crucifixion of Jesus is not a well-established historical event.
I think that's interesting because the crucifixion of Jesus is the most well-known historically attested event, not only by biblical sources, but also extra-biblical sources. So I know that your Quran mentions that it only made for him to appear that way, but it just confuses me. We have all these historical evidence, and the historians written about this, but 600 years later, you have Allah saying that it only appeared that way. So how does that make sense?
My position on the crucifixion of Jesus is that rather than him being crucified at the hands of both the Jews and the Romans, he was saved and raised to the second heaven by God. God did not allow a soul to harm him in that instance in terms of death and so on, right? And I obviously believe that although you guys believe that Jesus was crucified and that that theology is echoed within Christianity and so on and so forth, I do not believe that this is an undisputed fact, not just extra-biblically, but even within the Bible, due to a multitude of different inconsistencies and so on and so forth. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
So because there are ancient people that disagreed about whether Jesus was crucified, that means you can't trust the crucifixion actually happened. But that would be like me saying that there are some people who don't believe that 9/11 actually happened. Therefore, you can't trust that it did. Well, no, you have to compare the evidence that they give. And in the case of Jesus' crucifixion, we have the best evidence, including from enemies of Christianity. Tacitus, one of Rome's greatest historians, said in AD 64, that's the first century, Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate. And who agrees with Tacitus? Josephus, a Jewish historian, Paul, Peter, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the author of Hebrews. So it seems like there's overwhelming evidence from the first century that Jesus was crucified. But what evidence do the disagreeers have? Well, let's see what Cora says.
Okay, beautiful. So the Quran isn't actually the only instance in which somebody disputes the crucifixion taking place. We have historians also acknowledging, the same exact historians that you will appeal to say that the crucifixion happened, also say that there were early groups disputing the crucifixion, right? For example, we have groups such as the Basilidians who deny the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and they also believe that somebody else was crucified in his place, right? They believe in something called substitution theory. We also have some atheists that believe in something called swoon theory. Swoon theory is essentially Jesus being put on the cross and not passing away, and then when he was taken off and so on and so forth, that reconciles the gospel accounts when people saw him again. So we see a multitude of disputes, not just within theists, but within historical groups in the 1st and 2nd century, and we see church fathers acknowledging this as well. For example, we have Ignatius's congregation, we even have Paul in 1 Corinthians, we have a multitude of different study Bibles that say that Paul is addressing groups that denied the crucifixion in his time. So we see early dispute. This isn't a 600-year later development. This is something that was always going on in the 1st century.
That sounds smart until the second you open a history book. The Basilidians said that Jesus didn't die, but he was substituted for Simon of Cyrene, who was crucified in his place. But they came in the 2nd century. So like over 100 years after Tacitus and the Gospels. The swoon theory was proposed by a German atheist called Karl Barth. He said that Jesus didn't die, but was unconscious and was later resuscitated by his disciples. But he came in the 18th century. So almost 2,000 years later and over 2,000 miles away from where the events took place. But their theories don't even make sense, because if Jesus was substituted for Simon of Cyrene, then the disciples would have known, because they knew what Simon of Cyrene looked like, Luke 23:26, and they knew what Jesus looked like too, Mark 15:21. We know Jesus was not just unconscious, because when he was pierced in the side, according to John 19:34, blood and water came out. Now, this is not only a fulfillment of the prophecy in Zechariah 12, this is also one of the stages of death, known as postmortem hypostasis, when the blood is not being pumped by the heart, and so it separates into the thick serum at the bottom and then the light, watery plasma at the top. So Muslims like Cora need to answer, why should we believe 18th century and 2nd century accounts about what happened to Jesus and ignore the 1st century detailed eyewitness accounts? Well, to be fair, it's because she doesn't even believe that they were eyewitness accounts.
You say that the Gospels were authored by eyewitnesses. Do you have any evidence for that?
I don't, but what I can ask you is this. If Allah made Jesus to appear that way, why would he allow millions of people to be deceived for 600 years? If he's the most merciful, wouldn't that be kind of cruel for millions of people to be deceived by this?
Beautiful. So that kind of deflects from the topic itself, because obviously I can answer that question, that's not a problem, but I'm emphasizing on you saying that there were eyewitness accounts. If you say that the Gospels were eyewitness accounts, how can you simultaneously say that you don't know who wrote them? How can you now verify that they're eyewitness accounts if you can't even prove that the people who you claim wrote them actually wrote them?
Well, we also had Paul who mentioned that there were 500 eyewitness accounts that were still alive today.
Yeah, but that's not 500 eyewitnesses. That is one non-eyewitness mentioning that there were 500 eyewitnesses, not to the crucifixion, but allegedly to the resurrection.
The Christian didn't know how to respond because this was a really effective question, but there was a really big mistake that Cora just made. And if you don't spot this mistake, you'll get tripped up the exact same way. How can we know that the Gospels were written by eyewitnesses or contain eyewitness testimony? Well, how do we know anything is eyewitness testimony? There are 3 simple checks you can make. First check, was it close in time? In the case of the Gospels, every Gospel was written within living memory. So eyewitnesses were still alive at that time point and could have easily checked or pointed out lies if there were any. Second is, are there links to witnesses? In the case of the Gospels, Matthew and John were disciples of Jesus. Luke was a disciple of Paul, and Mark was a disciple of Peter. So they would have had access not only by themselves, but also to a network of people who can give eyewitness testimony. And the third is, are there small specific details that you expect eyewitnesses to have? Things like Simon of Cyrene being asked to carry the cross accompanying Jesus, which is not only in Luke 23 verse 26, but also in Mark chapter 15 verse 21. And then you've got names, the father of Alexander and Rufus. You've got places, the place called Golgotha. You've got details like wine mixed with myrrh. You've got details of Jesus being crucified on the day of preparation, being on the cross at a particular time, Pontius Pilate. All of these details speak to eyewitness testimony. So once we got those 3 checks, the question isn't just, can you prove that it's eyewitness testimony? The question is, do you have a reason why we should dismiss them as eyewitness testimony? Because in the case of the Gospels, there is absolutely none. When it comes to other theories for what happened to Jesus on the cross, Cora didn't need eyewitness testimony. The Basilidian, 2nd century, the swoon theory, 18th century, she was happy to consider those, whilst also dismissing the 1st century testimony and then demanding that you prove it is eyewitness testimony. Make it make sense. Well, this is because people do not reject the crucifixion or Jesus because of a lack of evidence. They reject it because of a hardness of heart. And that's why they're happy to shift the goalposts whenever they want, which is sad because in doing so, they're rejecting the very Messiah, the very Savior that could actually save them from their sins. It's the same reason that Cora, as many other Muslims, reject the Bible and say that it's corrupt, when we all know that isn't true. And to see that objection being brilliantly dismantled, check out the video on your screen. I hope this has blessed you. I'll see you there. Peace and blessings.